Good afternoon. It is May 2nd, 2011, and this is episode 7B of the Bad Dog Book Club. I'm Skip Ruddertail, your otter editor, and with me, as always, is...
Yeah, Toonces, the crosswalking cat. The cat that can get run over in a crosswalk.
And you'd be a two-dimensional cat.
Yeah, by somebody trying to get 30 feet down the road to stop at a red light. God damn it. It's gonna happen.
I hope not.
We'll talk to the drivers. I mean, I can do about it. I'm just following the law.
Hopefully it's not me that hits you, that's all. So we had last week's episode was a little bit of a first for us in a couple ways. Mm-hmm.
We had our wonderful guest on, Jay. Hope you all enjoyed him.
Well, I meant, that was 2 weeks ago. So I meant last week's episode.
Oh, yes. You mean
we did enjoy having Jay.
The reading, you mean?
Yeah, the reading. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because not only did we feature 2 stories for the first time ever, but you had to put up with each of our perhaps terrible voices reading them.
Thanks for indulging us, everybody.
Toonces did a great job. Yeah. Having edited it, I gotta say, we were very easy to edit. And you sounded good to me. Wonderful.
I think you did a great job, too.
Well,
we should give ourselves pats on the back.
Oh, there you go. Nobody else will, so we've got to. Now that we've lost the last 3 listeners we had, move on with a clean slate.
But, I mean, I had fun reading the story itself. I mean, I don't care if you enjoyed my voice, but Sedric has been one of my favorite writers for a while just because I really like the style he writes in. It's something that I could never, ever, ever imagine myself being able to reproduce. Mm-hmm. And I imagine it, for some artists sometimes, like artists who might be very, confident with their own style and their sense of direction artistically, who might see another artist just have the technical skills they don't have and maybe have some kind of envy. And I feel that way sometimes when I'm reading Sedric's work and his almost like flawless use of grammar and vocabulary and things like that. I don't know, it just knocks me over sometimes. That's why I wanted to feature that. I think this was the first story that he produced that I think didn't involve... what am I trying to think of? I'm trying to think of a playful way of saying this. But he finally wrote a story that I think was suitable for the ears of our listeners. And not better off being shuffled off to the side of a dark corner of an alley, as those, stories
this
are sometimes
is your polite way of saying this.
Well, I'm sure Sedric's smiling right now hearing this. I mean, it's kind of the point sometimes. Is you want to create your own space. The best way to do that is to scare people off and find a place to, become a recluse in. But I like that this story, it has these public aspects to it. Mm-hmm. And it also has these kind of self-conscious meta-narrative aspects to it, where the 2 characters are the author himself. Mm-hmm. He has this kind of his persona character, which I'm sure a lot of us have, and we think of as representing ourselves or a part of ourselves, so you can identify with that very easily. But then he also has his writer persona that I think comes in to represent what he sees as his artistic ideals and visions, and maybe some of his desires and these other things he tries to articulate through writing, and they have this conflict within the story. And I just think, reading it from the perspective of a writer, it's just an interesting thing to see, an interesting frame to put it in. And I would hope others would appreciate it, readers or writers alike.
Yeah, I thought it was really neat. So, I mean, author was the horny one, the pusher, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you think that says? The author, Sedric, is the one who's, saying, suck my dick, we're going to get you off right here in the middle of this bookstore.
And Sedric himself
non-author
is a little bit more...
Sedric. Well, is that Sedric himself? But
non-author Sedric. I think it is supposed to be the idea. I think it is supposed to represent Sedric
is sitting there going, you're crazy, and then, does it, of course, anyway.
Yeah, because it's a fantasy. He can.
Yeah.
And I think it's, like I say, it's self-conscious, and it's... it recognizes the fact that these things are more or less impossible unless you are interested in spending significant jail time. Anytime soon. So as you might be sitting around daydreaming about how hard it might be to, get down in the stacks in the library or at the bookstore, at the cafe or whatever like that. But for obvious reasons, you don't do it. But I mean, inside your head, no one's going to stop you.
Mm-hmm. So is this masturbation? then
This is, oh my goodness, this is 10 levels of masturbation. This is, I mean, okay, I'm sure Sedric won't blush to hear this with the humiliation kink guy that he is, but, I mean, when he's writing something like this, it is more or less just a foreplay act for cranking it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of appreciate that fact. I mean, it was never like that for me, but I kind of appreciate that fact just because it's about as pure and honest, I think, as you can get in writing. Because people, like, sometimes say dismissively about writing, it's such a masturbatory act. It's so, wait, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Not that there's anything
we can
wrong
run with that.
Yeah.
No, we can run with that. If you're gonna say it's a masturbatory self-serving act, then I'll self-service myself and masturbate while I'm writing. It's just kind of a very honest, almost self-effacing way of approaching it. It's fun.
So, and I guess my question is, so is this what he would like to do to himself, or is this, kind of part of, wishing how he was or something? I mean, is there some of that in here as
it's
well?
It's not a transformation story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's talking about what
but
a person necessarily wants to be.
Personality, Which, and we have talked about performativity before, so I think we can relate it to that. That they're both parts of who Sedric is, or a protagonist.
Yes.
Well, we probably got to add the third figure to this. We have Sedric author, Sedric non-author, and then we have Sedric who's the actual author.
Yes.
Who we don't directly see in this story, but will be a different person than Sedric author in this story. Even.
And we're totally breaking the rules of separating the author from the work.
We are. So that's why I wanted to remind us of that.
All the modernists
moment,
can eat 18 dicks, by the way.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted to refresh us. So as long as we are talking about Sedric author here, but it isn't Sedric the author.
It's Sedric and then Sedric as author and then Sedric the author that wrote the story. I don't know, it's becomes a bit like a Russian nesting doll at some point.
Somewhere there's a cat in a box that's simultaneously alive and dead as well. And with Sedric inside, some type of Sedric.
Yeah.
Sedric as cat in box. There are a couple of things I noticed. I think the first is the title. And, I read it, and I haven't... What is the title? Because I did not... Gap? Yes, Chitchester Gap, because I was like, well, it sounds delightfully British, and they are wearing raincoats, and so the setting it's very, British and stuff, but, yes, what is...
The Chitchester Gap.
Yes.
Okay, Sedric explained this to me when he submitted the story. I don't remember all of the most specific explanations. You and I actually looked this up. We tried to find it. It was on Urban Dictionary or something like that.
Yes, we did.
We couldn't find the specific definition. So as far as we know, Sedric is coining this.
Okay.
Or at least trying to push it that much further toward the tipping point.
We're going to do our part to spread it, but tell us what it is.
So the Chitchester Gap is the balance of space between the lips and the dick.
Yes.
Your own.
Yes.
Whatever you just can't quite get across, whatever that last little push you just cannot make, is your Chitchester Gap.
Chitchester Gap. Which is very clever, with what the subject of the story is then. So I definitely approve of the title, but if it is, let us know. If it is an expression you've heard before, let us know, because we've never run into it, and we can't find it on Google, so obviously it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
So it's either, maybe it hasn't broken yet, but we'll help break it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's a good image for the story because there's a gap between the two characters who are essentially the same person. The Sedric, the dragon in the story, the non-author, is a very respectable person. In a way, not the kind of person that, just looking upon him, you would expect has these fantasies until they're brought out upon by the author character. And I think that's how it is in real life, is you just see a very respectful, almost benign, unintriguing person if you were to see this author in the street. Mm-hmm. And then you have what they want to be. Yeah. But even when you separate it from the dirty aspects, what the Sedric character represents is a sort of meekness, a sort of passiveness, a sort of obvious insecurity. The character himself is very unsure of himself, and when you look at it in a more cynical way, even very able to be led along by a more dominant character, if you want to even accept that as kind of a negative character type, even to just, read a more cynical interpretation of this. And then there is the author character that is very outgoing, very persuasive, very confident, what you might expect you kind of get the impression that it's the gap here is between what the author sees himself as and what the author kind of wishes he was. And then the larger scene, like the humiliation, the public aspect, the cocksucking, that's all kind of the window dressing that kind of gets dressed up in this examination of this gap. That's what I like about the title. Is it kind of the sly reference to what you can't quite come across, what you can't quite make out.
So yes, and so the goal is, I think, let's say, this gap, that, I'd say positive numbers would be bad and negative numbers would be good. Don't you think? Yes. Yes. So that's also informative as you're spreading the term.
Negative integers.
Yes, negative integers.
That'd be the best.
Yes. So, like, if you have a Chitchester Gap of -6...
What's your Chitchester Gap?
That's very impressive. Oh, mine's like... Well, I don't know. This is very personal.
We can edit it out later on, but at least for on the record, okay, if you're hearing this now, skip.
Mine's like...
Gain a little bit of confidence.
Mine's like, I don't know, -0.5.
-0.5.
On a good day.
Mine's like +2.5 or something like that. I got no flexibility.
But see, the interesting is we both know.
We both know.
Man, we both know.
Yep. I'm sure important. A lot of people know. But it's just part of my training for this job. When I found out I'd be doing this podcast, I kind of thought I need to get into shape for this. I need to at least try to suck my dick at least once.
No, that's because it was the podcast.
Because it might come up. It could very well come up.
Worked. Yep. Okay.
Yep. +2.5. I wrote it down somewhere. I'm glad to finally have it done.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, this story did have my favorite line of the week too.
Oh, what's that?
Which was, "'Cause you're a submissive bitch with a small penis." And I guess
it's very direct.
It caught me. You gave it a great read, better than I did just now. But it really kind of caught me off guard, and it was so brutal and so rude. I mean, that's the word for it. Just so rude.
I think that's what writers forget sometimes, is that playfulness and cleverness isn't always the best way to go. Sometimes you really just need to be very direct and very curt.
Yeah.
That'll have the most striking effect.
And I found it very, effective. But it really, caught me off guard when I was, editing the podcast. And there you just blurt out with us. And I was like, whoa, that's so rude.
I think
so I really enjoyed it.
To me.
Yeah.
I think people are used to telling me that, don't you think?
Yes, I do, actually. But, it was good because it came out of nowhere and it, kind of established the characters, and it was something that they then played with, too, and made this a source of sexual satisfaction and power, and, taking this rude comment and turning it that way. So, I approved.
That's what it's all about, ultimately, is taking these things that you're a little bit insecure about, a little bit unsure about, and not just pulp specifically, but writing in general, and becoming comfortable in them or making them strengths, or however you want to see that specific construct. It's what a lot of people want to accomplish, and I think Sedric's probably done a pretty good job here. It's a pretty good story.
Yes. No, I enjoyed it. So good choice there. Good pick for a short story. So yes, if you got short stories, we can fit them in too. Don't feel like, it has to take half an hour to read. We'll find a way.
I prefer short fiction.
Yeah. And
you and I actually kind of get into arguments over this, and I feel it might just be because my first big writer that I got into was Franz Kafka, and he has a lot, especially in his complete stories selection. He has a lot of these little fragments, and I loved reading those and going through them and just seeing an idea expressed in only a paragraph or two, or 200, 300 words, whatever. I think sometimes it's even a much more efficient way of creating a very striking, specific image.
Yeah.
And I think people put too much credit on longer stories. I always get annoyed when people ask me, hey, Toonces, what should I do about commissions? I want to take commissions. Should I charge people for longer stories? Should I do by words? And I don't know. I don't get it. Why would you charge more for a longer story? It's just...
I don't like that too, and honestly that's something I want to change going forward in Fang, because I don't think that necessarily equates that a longer story is a better story, or a longer story is necessarily more work than a short story is. So I'd like, or at least some kind of hybrid model that everybody gets a base amount, and then maybe there's an additional, on that if you're over a certain word count. But I'd like to honestly get away for fame purposes from a simple pay-by-word model, because I don't think that's necessarily fair.
And don't you think that a lot of stories are artificially inflated for length? When you just think about the venues...
I read a lot of Dickens, honestly, who I love. But,
because these stories were originally published serially, right?
Tell, yes, that the man is being paid by the word. When you spend 2 paragraphs on the color of someone's vest and what it reminded David Copperfield of, you can tell the man was being paid by the word.
It's very obvious.
And I remember just being like, oh my god, I'm going to die in high school. And I love Dickens now, but yeah, some of them could use some condensing.
I wish people would. I really do wish people would start condensing their stories a little bit, especially as we get toward mediums of publishing that don't have to, rely on length. They don't have to be a certain length, shortness, or length.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter on the internet, on a web page, how long your story is.
You just have to scroll down. That's all.
Yep. No, so that was good choices, and I was glad we were able to feature a couple longer. And the only reason I wanted to pair it with something, because I know, people who are doing commutes or whatever kind of expect the podcast to take up a certain amount of time. So
do you really think people driving their cars? Do you think people driving their cars should be listening to Pulp?
Yes.
It's not to be distracted.
I do.
Oh my goodness.
It's like that Family Guy episode, though.
What?
You ever see that Family Guy where Peter is writing his Peterotica? And there's one, and it was like the half Italian girl, or maybe some kind of Spanish, as read by Betty White. She's sitting here, and the guy gets in an accident because he's like, oh yeah, that's hot, and like unzips himself and starts whacking it, and then gets in an accident. Exactly, that's what's
going to happen. You said you weren't going to run me over. You're going to be distracted by porn. I'm reading. You'll kill me in the crosswalk.
Yes. Oh, well.
Jeez, anyway, tragic.
So, no, it was good, and I like the little joke at the end too.
Oh, but you said
Atlas
what
Shrugged.
What did you say about Atlas Shrugged earlier? I mean, my boyfriend likes Atlas Shrugged. I have to actually deal with that.
We need to, send in help for Toonces, who is living in a very scary living situation right now with somebody who likes Atlas Shrugged.
Two log cabin Republicans, 2 of them.
Yeah. But no, I thought that was a nice little joke. So, and right as the movie came out, we did not, that wasn't intentional, I'm sure.
It tanked.
Yes, it did. Yeah, and the producer said he's not going to do any others because the critics were so mean to him. Poor Muffin. It's like, oh, but aren't you, who cares what the critics think? You're a capitalist. Go out there and make those movies. All right.
Because they just couldn't make money.
Yes. Shh. Not that would ever happen. Yeah, I guess basically the first day was good, and all the diehard Rand people went and see it, and then they all saw it, and nobody else wanted to see it.
Makes sense. I mean,
so it opened like twice as many screens the next weekend, and had half as many people come.
That's crazy.
Anyway, moving on. So our other parrot story was Vignettes from the Highway by Lycanthromancer, and he submitted this one, and I chose to run with it. And match it up. An image-dense story, yes.
Almost surrealistic in the way.
Exactly. No, I agree. I think so. I think it's very surrealistic, metaphorical. But I thought that was kind of neat because we're both sci-fi fans, as we've mentioned on the show before, and especially the last several episodes have been sci-fi episodes. Last episode, All Floor's story was very kind of traditional 50s. Hard sci-fi, in particular, even on a spaceship in hyperspace. You can't get more hard sci-fi than that. So here we haven't done a lot of fantasy, and honestly, dealing with, I think, furry writing, you're going to see, a good amount of sci-fi and fantasy. So we haven't done a lot of fantasy yet. So we had kind of one story with a fantasy element, or this kind of other, persona. And this story is probably a little more traditional fantasy. Not in the sense that it's, dragons and swords, but it is this kind of surreal, abstract, perhaps magical or otherworldly setting or other plane of existence.
I've never quite put that under the umbrella of fantasy, though. It seems to me the kind of thing you'd do if you were a bookstore manager and had to put something somewhere. But when I read a story like this, I just think it's on its own little plane of reasoning and time, not quite like fantasy is. Or sci-fi. We talk about, whenever we have the sci-fi stories on here, just the pains writers often go through to make this scientific world seem very relatable, almost even mundane or trivial sometimes, if they really want to get things grounded. But you have the opposite effect here with this story, where the images are kept very intentionally formless, and it doesn't really describe much of a logical day.
Right.
Sometimes people can be very critical of that because they feel as if writing only these images, writing only these kind of loosely put together abstractions, it's like putting together a bunch of sweets. You know what I mean? There's no real substance there. Would you do you think the story falls prey to that?
I don't think so. I think there's, it's kind of in the same way. I mean, it actually says in the title, but in the same way that Chitchester Gap is, it's kind of a vignette or a moment. Chitchester Gap's a very short, specific moment, which is one of the things I liked about it. And this is a longer moment. This is, I guess, probably over the course of maybe 12 hours or so, or 16 hours. But it's, a moment in the life of this character that says something about who this character is and what they do.
Yes.
And that's, all it needs to say, I think, in this case. So no, I think it does, it does exist for a reason. And it kind of takes us into the world of Hugo, our protagonist, who's this, odd, intriguing fellow. And I like it because there are all these little kind of hints, and just enough, I feel, is revealed in the story, which is one of the things I liked about it. There's a very fine line you have to do in these kind of weird stories. And this is another, like last week's story, this is another one I think that could be, it's sort of in that Twilight Zone-ish, idea where, we're in this alternate reality, but just enough, it raises a lot of questions and answers them just enough for me. I read fantasy and sci-fi stories that are too surreal, I feel like sometimes, where they kind of leave me feeling frustrated because everything is so disjointed, either contextually or temporarily, where I have a hard time following it, and it kind of leaves me frustrated and almost angry, or it's so... There was one in Asimov's, I don't know if you've gotten to it yet, where the story actually physically on the page is laid out with all these little blocks with other ideas, kind of interspersed throughout. And it really I found it distracting. And I guess that's the line that I feel Lycanthromancer stays on the right side of in this case, where the oddness of the setting and story doesn't become distracting from the story itself. It enhances, but it doesn't get in the way.
That's true. What I tend to like about when stories are drawn to abstractions like this is that it allows a certain undefined space that you can wriggle into. It's a lot easier to personalize these things and think of yourself in them if they're not being so specifically defined as being other. Maybe if this story were to have a more concrete storyline, a firmer direction to go in, it might alienate a bunch of the readers. Who might find themselves not identifying with the character quite as well.
Right.
It's a hard thing to do, though, because just as easily as you can allow people the space to identify with the character, you might also just leave the characters kind of hollow.
Yeah, you can leave the characters undefined, you can leave the author, you can leave the reader a way to get lost, too, I suppose, in the story, or disconnected from it. So
you have to create an intriguing bit of conflict or just some interesting catch for someone to latch on to. I think there's just the problem that Hugo describes. It's easy to immediately identify with his problem and understand this symbolism he has to get over. So,
and there's Matthew, who I like, though we don't see much of him. But I mean, the metaphor. I guess the thing that strongly came to mind as I was reading this story was Greek and Roman mythology and the figure of Charon, the boatman. It's Charon. Nobody ever... That's always a hard one to pronounce, but I think it's Charon instead of Charon. Yeah. A lot of people say Charon, but we're Americans and we can't talk. So. But yes, the boatman in Greek mythology who would ferry the dead the newly dead across the river Styx into the underworld, where they'd spend the rest of eternity. But they had to get across this river before they could, pass on fully.
So do you think trying to get over this wall represents suicide?
No. I think Matthew's already dead.
You think he's already dead?
Yeah, I think Matthew's dead. I think he's been dead probably for a long time.
So in this case,
So their side of the highway, the side that the story takes place on, I kind of read as something like purgatory, where these are, or not even purgatory, some just kind of netherworld where they are dead, but they haven't moved on to the next plane of existence.
I see.
Whatever that is, and because they can't for whatever reason.
And you think that's the side of the wall that the characters are on?
In Matthew's case, it's maybe because he's a little kid, and is scared, as we know, and he doesn't know what's going on, and so that's the side they're on. And if he's gonna, pass on to heaven or whatever the next plane of existence is, he needs to cross the highway, the river Styx, and get to what's over there. And I thought he could feel his family who'd already crossed over, in my reading of it, on the other side, but they had to find the right place along the highway. And they were just kind of, Matthew was drawn to it, said, here's the right place, this is where I need to go.
So I'd gotten a similar impression, although I had felt that the other side, over the wall, would be something more like purgatory, because the impression is that when Matthew gets over the wall, there's the impression that he has to go on some journey to find the rest of his family, which to me, I wouldn't assume that the final plane of existence, whatever you're going to, would entail some kind of journey to find things. There'd be either, like, if you go to heaven, your dreams would be granted to you. You go to hell, you'd be denied them eternally, so it wouldn't matter.
See, I could see that, except he said he felt his family was right on the other side.
Right on the other side?
Yeah, or like right on the other side of the highway from where they were at by the campfire. So I think they're probably, he has to climb. Hugo doesn't know what's on the other side of the highway. He can't see it.
Correct. And
so he doesn't know if there's another fence. He even tells Matthew, if there is another one, I can't help you climb it. You have to do that yourself. So there may be another fence. So there may be, I think you're right, there are other obstacles over there. But we don't know as the reader. I didn't think so. But I think it's a perfectly valid interpretation in your case to think so.
Slightly different ones, but we still center in on the same theme. It's weird because it calls up the same ideas, even though I don't believe death is mentioned explicitly other than in the car crash. So I don't know, it's not drawn out. This specifically represents death. I also thought that the wall could represent, if you want to read it in a more literal sense, some kind of immigration between nations. So he might feel that his family, although they're supposed to be dead, might be in this other country. That might be too literal a reading, though.
Well, here's the other thing I thought was interesting is, okay, if this is a metaphor, or if this is a parallel to the river Styx and trying to cross it, what are the cars?
What are the cars?
Because that's what I started turning over in my mind. Like, so in Matthew has to get across without being hit by these cars. What are the cars? Who's driving them? And where are they going? And that's what I started. That's what I started being like, oh my god, like what is that all about? Who's in these cars? Where are they driving?
Who drives the cars in Frogger?
Yeah, but exactly that too. Who drives the cars in Frogger? So no, that's something, and so I sort of feel like this is one of those stories that I think works well on its own, but I think it could also be, a part in a novel, or an introduction, kind of.
Yeah, I see.
Or the first chapter of a novel, and maybe we'd follow Hugo along, as he found other kids to help or whatever, and see, and maybe we'd find out then
and some of these
who's
symbols
driving the cars and what they represent.
No.
Or it could just be a short story, and this could all be exactly the river Styx, but translated into a framework that, somebody who died in the modern era, like Matthew, would understand.
Yeah, exactly.
So it could all just be kind of a project or projection of Matthew's mind when he died, and translating it. This is his understanding of the world.
Just the way his dream head interprets the action of
whatever
shutting
the
off the
thing
neurons.
is. Yeah.
Crazy.
So I really liked it. I like both of them.
Yeah, I thought it was
good.
It's a good selection, Skip. Thank you.
Thank you.
And a wonderful reading on it.
Well, thank you. So I think we're about done for today. We've gotten through good stuff. We probably spent more time talking about it than reading the actual story, but that was kind of fun too. So next time we have a selection from the upcoming volume of Roar, and it was chosen by Buck, who is the editor of Roar, and it's read by him as well. So that'll be up on the website shortly. The podcast will be up next week, and we'll be discussing it in 2 weeks. If you have a story you would be interested in submitting for the podcast, please drop us a line at baddogbooks.com/book club.
Yeah, and send me an email. I'm toonces@drivingcat.org.
Both of our emails are up there, and you can check us out on FA and AIM and all these other. Yeah, we're friendly too. I had somebody say, "Oh, I didn't want to drop you a line on AIM. It's right on my FA page. It's Skip Rudder. If you want to drop me a line on AIM, go crazy. I'm always happy to talk to people."
I'm not really a jerk. I just play one on the radio.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, and if you're interested in reading, drop us a line too. We always like having guest readers. So that's about does it. I've been Skip Ruddertail, and
I'm Toonces. Please stop for pedestrians, everybody.
Yes, stop for especially him. So. And we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Ciao.